Well, welcome back for another episode of the Chamber Podcast. My name is Rob Johnson. We have a very exciting show for you today. Joining me in studio is Karen Shaper. She is the owner of Shaper Enterprises. She is a speaker, an educator, wife, mom, and interestingly enough, an owner of a miniature pony, which we'll get into here very shortly. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I am so excited about being here and talking about the things that I love to do, and that includes speaking and teaching and, of course, the little miniature horse.
It's a little intimidating. I have a professional public speaker sitting across the table from me, and I am just an amateur, just faking it for all the listeners.
I don't know about that. I don't. I feel very privileged to be sitting across from you right now.
Well, feeling's mutual. I'm excited to dive in, and I think more than anything, I wanted to tell the story of how does someone go into the public speaking arena, to a place where they're respected, they're called upon to not only speak on topics such as, purpose and leadership, but also teach other people how to do those things. So that is not a 60-second question. I fully understand that. But I just want you to tell the listeners like what that journey has been like and how you got there.
Everything in life is a journey, and what we start out doing is never where we end up. I started college when I was 18, didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, dropped out. Didn't care. Went back, thought, what am I going to do? So I decided, I'll try a communications degree. But when I was 16, 17, I was the kid hiding underneath the desk going, why would I do something like this? So I decided I'll try it. I wanted in and out, thought I'd get a degree. Ended up meeting a teacher who led me down a different path. She goes, try teaching, college. All you need is a master's degree. And
I like that. All you need.
All you need is a master.
It's all you need is a 6-year commitment to higher education, and you can teach college. All you need.
She goes, you've got the enthusiasm. And I'm like, okay, now we have some sort of a purpose going on. I decided to try it, found out I absolutely loved it. Got into public speaking. My first year teaching, I'll say my first probably 3 weeks, I was ready to walk out the door. I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I stuck with it. Absolutely love it. I think I've made differences in students' lives. I've received emails that I have. But as always, with anything, we all want the next step. We want to take on more. And I wanted to do this, but I'm like, what can I do? But then I looked at it and I'm like, if I'm teaching public speaking, I need to show my students I can do this. Because a lot of people say, teachers just teach, but they can't do. I'm not going to be that person. So I thought, you know what, if I'm going to teach this stuff, I'm going to get out and do it. So I joined a Toastmasters club, absolutely loved it, and then started realizing I need a little more practice getting up and being better. Which then led me to a professional speaker who I went out and had him coach me. And I'll tell you what, when you get coached by a professional who's a world champion, you realize you got a lot of room for improvement. But he was very kind, and I learned a lot from him. And one of the things that he said to me, which I thought was really interesting, most people who educate don't want to be critiqued to go to the next level. Those words have stayed with me for a very long time because I want to keep learning. Because if I'm better at what I do, I'm better in the classroom for my students to learn from me to make their steps in life better. I want to have them prepared to go out in the world and understand public speaking is important. I've been critiqued by him several times, and every time I've been critiqued by him, I've learned something from him. He's had Hollywood writers, script writers from Hollywood. And when you get critiqued by them, again, you realize you need to keep doing this to get better. And I have. So I started doing speeches. Some you start out doing for free as we start out. And then, of course, then the paid ones come. And with every speech, you get better at what you do. You learn from the last one. You learn how to handle an audience. I'm not going to say every speech was perfect. There's always the ones that, we wish would go away. And it's like, I could have done a better job. But then there's always the ones you walk away and go, that was great. I left the audience energized, and I love that feeling. And I have to say, I've probably had more moments like that than the ones where I didn't feel I walked off the stage going, I didn't do so well. I think with every stage we walk on, we can leave an audience with something good. And it led me to a TEDx last year. And doing TED was an incredible experience. I loved it. I loved the process. I loved the speech that I did about purpose. Because a line that I use in that speech is, if you could design your life any way you wanted it, what would you do? And I ask that question now in class. My students sit there. They don't know what to do. Nobody's ever asked me that.
Yeah. And I would imagine that people are coming at it from a position of they don't know, because no one's ever encouraged them to think beyond, let's say next year at the most. And giving someone an exercise of what's the next 10 to 20 years look like, it's difficult, but it's important. It's important to think about that.
Exactly. And if you could design your life the way you wanted it, and you sit down and think, don't put the obstacles in the way. Get rid of the obstacles.
Yeah.
Because we are our worst enemy in putting the obstacles there. And when we start, okay, so you get an obstacle. So if you want to be a professional speaker, okay, what path am I going to take to get there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're going to end up with some places that maybe it'll be hard, but okay, have a plan.
Yeah.
And when you start having a plan, it's amazing how those obstacles start to go away.
Yep. Yeah, and that's just something too. This is important, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast are business owners. So I like to interject a little bit of business into this, if you don't mind. But I think one thing that I always teach people on when I'm consulting is, if you don't have any measurable goals in front of you, and you're just saying we're just going to get through this, or we're just going to power through this year, you are doing yourself such a disservice, because the more that you identify what your goals are going to be, the quicker you're going to achieve them. And I've had a leadership team in my company for 2 years, and this is the second year that we've done measured goals. And this is now everyone's kind of tracking with this. Like, we hit our goals, and it's July for the year. And if you have those goals in place and you execute against them, things just work much faster. So for your students, and when they're thinking about this, and they're saying, I'm going to do 5 free speeches. And then by the 4th one, you might be like, well, I got a paid one. Now I'm early. Now I'm ahead of schedule. Or now I need to do 5 more because the first 5 I didn't like how it went. But at least now you have a plan you're working against, right?
Absolutely. And having a goal in mind, regardless if it's education or in the workforce, you've got to have a goal, even at home.
100%, especially at home.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have a plan or a purpose, what do you guys want to do this year? If you're a couple and you want to go on vacation, okay, do I start making the plan in January to think about where I want to go for July? That sometimes works better, because then you have opportunity to think about where do you want to go. And I'm not saying spontaneous isn't great as well, but sometimes you got to think about cost, where you want to go, how are you going to travel, are you going to fly, are you going to drive? Start putting those plans into play and setting that goal to get there. Mm-hmm. Or a cruise. Some people love to do cruises, and some, there is a financial challenge. So I can't go this year, but maybe I can go next year if I start planning today.
Yeah.
And having that goal is, I think, changes everything, whatever it might be. I suffered through infertility for 10 years, and my goal was to have a child. And I wasn't going to let anybody tell me no. And there was a lot of people that told me it wasn't going to happen. And it happened, but it took 10 years.
And I'm sure a lot of frustration and setbacks. And
absolutely.
I would imagine that's an incredibly painful journey to make your way through, and you did it. Congratulations on that.
Oh, he is the love of my life. He's my spark. He's my energy. He keeps me going. I see things that I never saw before with him. And it is amazing when that finally happened. And I had a team of people that helped. And I think sometimes we do forget, whatever struggles you might be struggling with, having a team of people around you, doctors, friends, any kind of support that you can get, that's the kind of support you need to get you through those tough times. And again, I go back to, what would life look like if I could design it the way I wanted it? well, that wasn't the design that I had envisioned, but I got something better. And that's okay with me now.
And as you're looking at where you're at right now, and if you were to dial back, let's forget about COVID and let's just say go back before that. What is the contrast between your life as a professional speaker 5 years ago to where it is right now, and how has that grown and evolved?
That's amazing. I find that I'm a stronger speaker. And the reason why I say that is I reached out for mentors, not only from the person who coached me, I reached out to somebody else who introduced me to horses and to communication. And it was amazing when you start seeing different ways that you can use communication to teach. And I'm talking about leadership in ourselves, how we lead in the workplace, how we lead in anything we do in our lives. I think being curious is a sign of a leader. And if we're not curious, how can we expect anybody to follow us if we're trying to be the leader out there? And I want to be curious, and I want to learn. If you think back 10 years ago or so now, time flies so fast, doesn't it? The Chile miners. That was a worldwide disaster that happened.
Yeah.
It took the world to bring people together to save those men. But when it came down to it, the reason why they were saved was because somebody was curious in how to bring those men up. And I find if we're curious and we put away all of our egos and become humble, wow, you can change the world.
Yeah. And that's difficult for people to see. And that kind of goes back to what we talked about with planning and thinking about what you want for your life. And as you're thinking about those things, it's difficult, especially when you might be in a difficult situation, whether it's financially or educationally or just relationally. It's difficult to see past all of that. And, you mentioned, doing things that change the world. I think people don't give themselves enough credit for the things that they actively do at a local level or even within their home that are going to go on to have a major reverberation within the world, whether it's how they parent their kids or how they work through their local church, whatever it might be. But I think having more perspective on that would help people be better.
And I think we never really know the impact that we make on people.
Right.
And that's okay.
Both positive and negative.
Both positive and negative, and I hope more positive.
Yeah.
And I think we have that opportunity every day to make a positive intake on somebody. That's where you have the opportunity to become the leader. And honestly, that's what I teach my son every day. He's 10, and I want him to be a leader. And that leadership starts with, hey, how are you? How you doing today? Look at me in the eye. Have a conversation with somebody, because you know what? You might just be the reason why that person smiled today.
Yeah.
And that changes the world. And sometimes we don't realize a little smile can change the world for that person that day.
For sure.
And we have great opportunity.
Absolutely. When you think about all of your education collectively and what you've taught to your students, what's the number one advice for public speaking that you typically give Karen, I need some quick advice. I'm about to go give this big talk in front of 500 people. It's my first time. What do you tell them?
Be confident. Know your content. Why are you speaking on something? Well, you're speaking on something because you're an expert on it. And we're not all experts in every field. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. You're being asked to speak because you're an expert. They trust you. And if you have the trust, all you need to do is make sure you've practiced and be confident in what you're doing, and you'll be fine. 9 times out of 10, we're fine. And the other one, nobody's ever gonna know.
Yeah, it's amazing. My daughter is also 10, and she had to give a presentation at the science fair for her homeschool group, and she got up practicing at home, and we were walking through it, and she crushed it. Like, it was almost like a sales pitch. Like, she's trying to sell this thing to me. It was really good. And that was, I told her, people don't know what you were or were not going to say unless you have a PowerPoint behind you that has your entire speech written out, which pro tip listeners, don't do that. No one's going to read it.
No, please don't.
Yeah. 6x6 rule. Google it. It's super important.
Absolutely.
But unless you're going to do that, no one knows. So it's okay to have, and also too, those little personal moments where you mess up and, it's fun. It makes the talk more engaging too.
It makes it real.
Right.
And when you get up and speak, you want to talk about what's in your heart. I don't want to hear what somebody's written out word for word.
Yep.
Because then the message gets lost in there because all you're trying to do is read. If that's the case, then give me the paper and let me read it.
Yeah.
I want to hear what's in somebody's heart.
Yep.
And when that comes through, that moment, when you hear somebody speak from the heart, you're hearing what's real, what's raw and emotional, and the connection becomes amazing. And it doesn't really have to matter how great or how well prepared. I don't want to use the word well prepared, but prepared you are.
Sure.
You know what the content of that speech is, and you know that it has meaning, and the audience will know that it has meaning.
Have you ever ran into someone where it's like, this isn't for you?
Oh, yeah.
How do you tell them that?
It's not so much I tell them that. I tell them, I get the story of, hey, public speaking, it's easy. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And usually what happens is they're the ones that are going up and rambling. So now what you got to do is reel them back in and say, hey, listen, you've got good information, but let's try to bring it home. What is your real message? So I don't ever want to turn somebody's voice off because everybody has a voice. But I think the thing we need to learn when we speak is we got to speak, here we go, with purpose, with meaning. So when somebody listens to you, you have a goal. You know what you want to say. We don't need every specific detail about what happened. What were the big moments? Those are the things that we need to share. What were the ahas of, hey, what really did that moment mean to you?
Yeah.
Speak with purpose.
Yeah. I always think about it like, what is the one thing if someone walked out that they captured from what you said? Did you walk away with something meaningful? And was your talk or education or whatever you want to call it, your speech, was that built around someone walking away with something of meaning? Yes.
And it comes down to, I can tell you, there's several speeches that I remember very well. And I hate to say the bad ones, I can remember they were bad. And I don't really remember all the details, but the ones that were good, those were the ones that stay with me. And you talk about what stuck with me. There's one speech a few years back a guy did about teaching me how to feed your dog raw meat. And I'm like, not anything that I would ever do. But he loved his dog and he wanted the best for him. And he researched all this information out. And I'm like, you love your dog. And that was amazing. It was a speech because it came from the heart. He told us all of this process. So not only was it about the dog, but it was about how he loved this dog so much that he went out every Saturday to the butcher to buy what he needed to do, go home, process this food for his dog. That was amazing. And that was a speech that is memorable because he spoke from the heart. And I love those kind of things because now I really learned something that I'll never do, but I know he did, and that was amazing. So what you learn from public speaking is amazing from what people have been through. I've heard about a gentleman that was struck by lightning twice. How do you survive that and not win the lottery?
Yeah.
It was an amazing story. So did I learn something from that? Absolutely. He spoke from the heart. He told us what happened. He never thought it would happen again, and it did. What a story. And that's what a lot of times public speaking is. It's telling a story from the heart that you learn about what somebody has been through. But you want to be specific with it. It's like when I teach this in class, we talk about the Grand Canyon. Okay, what do you want to know about the Grand Canyon? We can talk a million years worth of Grand Canyon. What do you want to talk about? The wildlife, the rock formation, the rivers, the vacation, the hotels, hiking. When you really break it down, there's a lot there. So what is that experience about that you want to speak about it? And when people hear that, then they go, that's right. How do you bring it in to where I can speak about that? And that's what I love to do. And when you can break things down to where people can be very specific, you see the bulb on their head go on, and the light bulb just went boom, and all of a sudden you see magic happen. And that's when I do a presentation. I really drill the planners. What do you want? Because sometimes they're not sure because they're getting 10 people telling them what they want and they're trying to plan. And when you really drill down, you've got to know the right questions to ask to make sure that when you walk on that stage, you're giving the message that people want to hear.
Yeah. It's important. It's important to, you don't necessarily always want to play to your audience, but you want to understand who your audience is and how you're going to gear that talk towards that group, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I want to transition slightly, and this, I say slightly, it's actually a pretty major turn. I want to talk about this miniature horse.
Oh, I love talking about Luna. Again, she's a communication aspect of things that I do.
So it's a talking horse.
No, she's not a talk. Well, she talks in her language. I'll put it that way. What that is, during COVID, I decided to do some research about communication. Again, I wanted to grow. I felt like if I can't grow, then I can't make my students grow. I found a woman in Pennsylvania that had a horse farm, and she was bringing corporate people out to teach leadership. And I'm like, what an amazing thing to do.
So hold on. Just want to make sure I got this right. So she's got a horse farm in Pennsylvania, and she brings corporate people out to hear talks about business or anything at the horse farm?
Basically, she was teaching teams how to work better.
Oh,
with
so
each
she's
other.
the teacher. I see.
She was the
I thought it was like a venue. Like she just it just happens to be at a horse farm. Okay,
She owns
so
that.
she's teaching like corporate comms.
Yep.
At her horse farm.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And I never would do this, but I bought a plane ticket and headed to Pennsylvania. Was just in awe for a week about everything that I learned and watched people do. But what I learned more was about myself. And I'll give you an example of it. Was she had me lunge a horse, and that's where you run them in a circle. And she goes, lunge the horse. So I did, over and over and over again, to the point where she goes, Karen, stop. She goes, how many times did I tell you to lunge the horse? Yeah. Didn't ask. Then their next question was, where in your life do you do this? Oh, that was not a good question to ask me.
Yeah.
The first person that came to my head was my husband. Because I asked him the same thing over and over and over again. How does that communication go for you?
Yeah.
Not very good.
Yeah.
Because it causes a lot of frustration. So when you start really breaking down communication and what you do with different activities with horses, then it opens up doors for communication. We see things that we do, how we can change. We can't change other people. And I always make that very clear to in any of my classes. You cannot change other people, but we can change ourselves. And when we change ourselves and how we communicate, boy, does that change the world. See, we're going back to changing the world again.
Yeah, all from a horse.
All from a horse.
A mini horse.
So I came back with this experience and decided I need to do something. So I started, again, an obstacle was I had no horse. Never owned a horse in my life. And my husband's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out somehow. That was an obstacle in my way. Well, guess what? I found a farm that was willing to let me use horses to teach people. I did. Next thing I know, I wanted a horse. But I'm thinking, I've never owned one. I know they're a lot of money. Everybody keeps telling me they're a lot of money. And I'm like, I can't. Do I want to make that investment? Well, sometimes karma says, go this way. And there was some energy pushing me to this place. And in conversation with a friend, she goes, there's a horse that needs a home. It's a miniature horse. I went out and I saw her, and my son says, Mama, we have to have her. Next thing I know, I'm calling my husband up and saying, we're going to get her. She's an amazing little horse. She stands about maybe 35, 34 inches high. Most people say, my dog's bigger than your horse. Like, okay. But she helps, she's worked with kids to how to read better, how to understand patience. I think something we could all do sometimes, be better at patience.
100%. I am guilty.
Me too.
Super guilty.
Still am.
I don't know how to break that, but one day.
So Luna just went to Ann Arbor over the weekend and worked with some cancer patients. And it's called, now that one was called Equine Assistant Therapy, but the one that I typically use with her is Equine Assistant Learning. And it is amazing when you start realizing you can add something else to make us learn how to communicate better, such as a horse. And the reason why people use horses versus dogs in her case is that a horse is a reflection of you. So when people say, that horse is really stubborn, well, I usually go, ooh, that person must be very stubborn. And most people usually say, well, you're usually the stubborn one. And that's usually what comes out of it, is that what skills can we do to do better with ourselves? And going back to even like leadership, if you're trying to be a leader and you are doing nothing but cutting your staff down all the time because they're not making goals, how do you think your staff's going to perform for you? Hey, I'm going to run out there and do some more hard work so he can tell me what kind of a crappy job I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's all in how you say things. Hey, your numbers have been down, or your performance hasn't been as creative as usually it is. What's going on? Have a conversation with people. Learn about what's going on. It's amazing then what might happen in your life that will make, hey, I want, most people talk about losing employees these days because they don't feel valued. If you make me feel valued, I may want to stay a little longer.
Yeah.
And if you've put in 6 months worth of training into them, why wouldn't you? I did a speech with McDonald's last year regarding that because they were losing people all the time. And they're like, we can get them to stay 30 days more, we've succeeded.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think this gets into a whole nother topic we could probably spend 3 hours on. But
Exactly.
It is such an interesting leadership dynamic when people are not thinking about the long-term consequences of their action as it relates to their team. And, I'm excited to see some more data come out on this, but there was some preliminary data it was shortly after COVID had broke and fast food restaurants were all in this bidding war for signing bonuses for people. And they were trying to figure out unique ways to get people to stay. And they were like, work today, pay tomorrow.
Yep.
We'll pay you $500 sign-on bonus if you're here for 90 days. None of those things worked.
Nope.
And the reason why they didn't work, and the reason why I knew they weren't going to work, is because there's no long-term incentive based into them being grafted into the culture of that company. Whether it's a high turnover job like a fast food worker, or it's a factory job, it's a white collar job, whatever. The formula is the exact same.
It is.
There's no differences. So it's always interesting to me that, we expect, this is going to work, even though we know historically it's never worked in any platform, but let's give it a try. It's going to make it worse.
And I agree. I've had students who have suffered over the last couple of years, and I've started reaching out to them more. And I usually find when I reach out, a lot of people are saying, hey, they're just bad students. No, they're not bad students. They've just got stuff going on. And sometimes people don't know how to address those things, but when you reach out to people, it's amazing what you learn. You've opened up the door for them to seek help. And that's what I think I've learned most about getting on a stage. And I hear people's stories when they come up and say, hey, that speech resonated with me. I won't forget that now. Mm-hmm. That says a lot to me. And I know that I spoke into somebody's heart that day. And I want to take that and apply it into my own classroom or work or whatever I can do to be a leader to show that is important to me.
Absolutely. I love it. So what is on the docket for the next year? What's on Karen's schedule?
Karen's schedule, go back to school, teach, get Luna. I want to bring Luna back out to work with kids, do some reading programs with her so kids can come out and read to her, show that, hey, if you make learning exciting, kids will learn. Same thing with adults.
Yeah.
When you make things exciting, I think we forget. Everybody learns in a different way these days. And you can take this from an education or even when you're developing your new training styles at work.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody learns differently, and I think sometimes we forget visual learning is important because our younger generation is visual. That's what they like. So whatever you can do, and that's what I'm going to try to encompass into things that I'm doing is more visual type of things. I want to get out there and speak more. I've been speaking a lot of things outside of the state of Michigan, doing companies, but I want to speak more in Michigan. I've worked in healthcare for many years, so I understand the healthcare industry. I understand that it's a frustrating thing there, and I'm talking not only on the staff side, but the patient side. It goes both ways.
For sure.
And how to integrate that and make that process better. I love to speak on those type of things. I love to speak on anything that has to do with leadership or a purpose or making anybody to take a step in a direction to put them somewhere where they want to be. If you could design your life the way you wanted it, what would you do? And get rid of the obstacles in there. And that would be amazing. So I'm going to keep moving forward and trying to bring my message more local to what I want to do. I'm going to keep working with my horse. My kid is going to keep helping me. Scotty loves to work with her, and he is reading at an 8th grade reading level right now. He's only going into 5th grade.
It's great.
Isn't it? I won't take all the credit for that, but when a kid sits down and can read a 300-page book faster than me, that's scary. And regurgitate everything that he read from it is amazing. But I think education is something that we need to be curious about, meaning in any type of way that field that we go into. Podcasting, what's interesting about this? Well, you set up a room, you bring people in, you learn, you talk to them, you ask questions, and it's amazing what you take away every time you have the platform to speak to somebody. So speaking on stage and listening to your audience, I think is really important, and that's where I want to keep going. I want to, like I said, I want to be more in this area. I like traveling, but I think there's people in the Livingston County area that I can help and become better with.
I love it. So if people are wanting to know more, book you for a speech or two, what's the best website?
Shaper Enterprises. That's a good place to find me. If you're interested in horse kind of work as well with kids, I have Horse Bits Academy. Luna always loves it when people come out and meet her as well. She is quite the character. So yes, either one, shaperenterprises.com or Horse Bits Academy. Either one of those are great. Email, my email addresses are on those. I'm a quick person who answers emails. I don't wait.
It's good. We're going to test you at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. We're going to see how that response time is.
Well, maybe I might answer at 5.
All right.
I always tell my students, you can email me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll email you back around 6 and see if you're awake.
Yeah, that's a pretty good turnaround still, 4 hours. So,
exactly.
I love it. Well, Karen, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, this is going to wrap up our episode on the Chamber Podcast. Certainly appreciate you watching and listening. If you want to be a guest on the Chamber Podcast, please reach out to the Brighton Chamber of Commerce. Their website is in the show notes. If you want to know more about our guest, Karen, today, you can find both of her websites in the show notes as well. Apart from that, we'll catch you next week. Take care.